Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I am joined tonight by JMic. We are at the very end. The lights are dimming. The band is packing up. The custodians are sweeping the dance floor. We dump the punch out the back door. The Dynasty Dummies 2023 Rookie Hootenanny is coming to a close. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It's the Catch These Hands episode, the final catch-all. We've got 3 running backs, 3 receivers. They're probably not the players we should have been watching. I feel like we missed out on Trey Palmer. I feel like we missed out on Tyler Scott. I feel like we missed out on Sam Laporta. So there's still some interesting players in this class. We're not going to get to them in anything formal. We'll probably watch them. We'll probably talk about them. But it's going to be a wrap on the Hootenanny. JMic, how you doing?
It's the final countdown. I mean, listen, as Zach previously mentioned, you ain't got to go home, but you got to go. We clean it up. And as you said, Zach, and quite frankly, I'm well. Thank you for asking. But no one can say that we are not men of the people. These are players that were suggested, that were highlighted to us from folks who rock with us, who listen to us, both new listeners and folks who have been with us for a very long time. And so we're here to serve the folks, serve the people. We've watched more players. We've watched a bunch more games. We found, we'll see, maybe a guy or two here at the tail end that is interesting. But like you said, and I think I'm really excited to be able to, even as we clean up the dance, the Hootenanny, I'm excited to be able to go back and check out a couple of players in these last couple of weeks before the draft because it's quickly approaching. Zach, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, we're almost there. We finally get to the point where we're getting the last piece of the puzzle. We're getting to the point where the NFL can't lie to us anymore. They can't tell us that they love these players. They can't tell us that, oh, yeah, we definitely traded up to take CJ Stroud. They can't lie anymore. It's where the rubber finally meets the road. And it's exciting. It's the kind of the culmination of the last 6 months of what we've been doing. It's wild that we watch rookies for that long. Like I started in September this year.
Ooh,
yeah,
really?
yeah. Well, it was a big class, a deep class, and I had to get ahead of it. I had to get ahead of it.
And in the end, we still end up behind because there's guys that we want to see. Something about a tortoise and hare, and I don't know, slow and steady. Anywho, as we transition into the actual players that we'll be talking through this evening, again, 6 players, a few wide receivers, a few running backs, and hopefully some intrigue. And again, we're happy to be able to help shed some light on the things that we see in the film. And again, hopefully you take this and make this part of your process. But to everyone, each and every single one of you, I don't want to go any further. Again, you could have chosen to spend your time doing anything in the world. And for you all to be able to choose to spend time with us, whether it be live week in and week out in the chat, whether it be in podcast form, whether it be in YouTube later, or even on Twitter, reaching out to us, DMing us players that you'd like us to check out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We don't take your time for granted. We appreciate you wanting to be able to hear us out and listen to us and care about the things that we have to say about this. Again, it's a privilege to be able to do this, and we're grateful for the opportunity. And with that, I'm ready to get into the evening. Zach, you ready?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right. First player on the board for the day. We are going with grown man himself, one Charlie Jones, wide receiver by way of Purdue. He's one of these guys, Zach. We were laughing previously about guys born in the 2000s. He's actually one that's currently 24 years old. He was born in 1998. He'll be 25 in October, which is kind of wild for him, but he's had a pretty windy road to get to where he is currently. Couple years at Buffalo, one where he redshirted, one where he produced minimally. 2019, he sat out because of those transfer rules when he transferred to Iowa. His actual time at Iowa, he spends 3 seasons, and all in that time, I think people were probably like, okay, what exactly are we getting here for a guy who's been playing college for forever now? And in his 6th collegiate season, transfers to Purdue and becomes a second-team All-American, first-team All-Big Ten, and he leads the country in receptions. How does that happen for a guy who, again, Buffalo to Iowa to Purdue, because, that's what superstars do. 110 receptions, 1,361 yards, and 12 touchdowns on the year. Again, production out the wazoo this past season with another guy who is hoping to be drafted. Hear his name called in the NFL draft, quarterback Aiden O'Connell. Zach, let's talk a little bit of Charlie Jones and, again, his wayward road to where we are now.
Yeah, 6 years. If he's in the Steelworkers, the Ironworkers Union, he's vested in his pension. Like he's doing well. But Charlie Jones to me sounds a little bit more like a TIG welder than an NFL receiving prospect, or maybe the forklift operator down here at South Central Receiving. You know the one, Jonesy. What's up? But Jones has bounced around blue-collar schools from Buffalo to Iowa, finally landing at Purdue in 2022, promptly dominated the team's receptions, yards, and touchdown catches. Even though Jones blazed a 4.43 at the combine, I don't think speed is actually his primary weapon. Jones is very skilled at reading cushion and understanding how to use leverage to his advantage. He breaks off underneath the defender who's playing off him, and he presses deep downfield against tighter coverage. Jones has great hands, especially when he's not in a contested catch situation. He also understands how to deploy a multi-level attack versus zone coverage. He's another one of those players who does a good job finding that space on the sideline between layers of the defense. And on that sideline, Jones is really talented with his feet. He gets oftentimes both feet down, which you don't have to do in college. It's nice to see practicing for the pros, but he does that pretty consistently. And so there are some things about Charlie Jones's game that I think are really nice pieces.
And so often, Zach, I feel like the majority of his success comes when he is lining up off of the line of scrimmage. So your Z roll, and anytime he's in the slot or stacked. And quite frankly, he feasts on off coverage. Anyone who is playing off on him, he's able to basically have his way at all levels, which I think that's probably where his 4.43 really stands out. When people are playing off of him, he's able to eat cushion. He's able to essentially get to wherever he needs to be a primary target for his quarterback. Thought he was a crispy route runner, and and it's funny that we're talking about this timing wise, because we just watched Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think he has a really SGA feel to his game, especially on takeoff. And this is why I say that when he is essentially the ball snapped and he's taking off, there are times where he shows and exhibits really quick feet, and he's able to really kind of get moving and get going. There are other times where he's patient and he's taking his time to be able to set up whatever the case is. And I think that he's got a really nice methodical feel, which is so SGA. Like it eats at me how good that is. And I think, Zach, for all that we've watched, he may have some of the best hands in this class.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit here and act like, oh, and it's not even close. but straight up, his hands are incredible. Over the middle, like you highlighted on the sidelines, there's so much good to his game. With that, Charlie Jones, 6th-year breakout, 25 by the time he finishes his rookie season. Zach, talk through a little bit of the takeaways in reference to Mr. Charlie Jones?
Well, throughout his collegiate career, Charlie Jones was moved around. You mentioned this, playing snaps both in the slot and split out wide. But at the next level, I think he will most likely be primarily a slot receiver. That's where you saw him have his success. Jones has trouble with contact throughout his route, often getting sucked into defenders and finding himself unable to get free. He likes to get in that contact and he likes to fight a little bit, but he doesn't have the quicks to kind of get himself out of it. And even on deep routes where Jones can use that top gear, he seems to be able to put just half a step of ground between himself and the corner. And so that makes for really tough throws for the quarterback, but it also increases the level of difficulty of that catch because now he's got to contend with the defender. And I don't think that Jones possesses the requisite agility and twitchiness that he needs to consistently separate from defenders who can get up and get onto his body. Once you start looking at the rate of return of the players who are drafted after day 2, and then cross-reference that with the knowledge that Charlie Jones was a 6-year receiver and that the receiver position is an even worse bet in the later rounds, it's pretty easy to see the writing on the wall for Charlie Jones. He'll get a look because of his speed and because he impressed at the combine, but I think the aggregate of Jones's skill set is going to be tough to play at the next level, and it's going to be really tough to produce for fantasy, driving enough targets for him to be relevant on our end.
And that's the thing, that lack of play strength, lack of strength within the actual route, because I think he does show toughness, especially after the catch. Not particularly dynamic after the catch, I wouldn't say, but he does. I feel like he probably makes the most of his ability. I just don't know that he's super creative in terms of what he's actually able to do. I think he shows some craft in his actual routes, but I don't necessarily see that after he's got the ball in his hands, and he loses so many contested catch opportunities, which is weird because they gave him so many opportunities one-on-one downfield. And I'm like, why? And I saw where he would go to try to attack the ball, but he's just simply not winning enough to warrant all of that volume, which I found just confounding to a good degree.
Yeah, it's funny. PFF charted him. He only had 6 drops, like career 6 drops. But then you watch him and you're like, well, yeah, it's because anytime it's a tough contested catch, he's not getting to the point where he drops it. It's just he's losing at that catch point. So
yeah, and in press coverage, yeah, I mean it's pretty much wrapped. So incomplete grade, unfortunately for old Jonesy, but we'll keep it moving here with our next player, Andrei Iosivas. Listen, 6'3", 205, 5th-year senior out of Princeton. The guy is a certified athlete's athlete with the way that he was performing in the heptathlon at Princeton. Listen, pretty absurd measurements. I feel like it's all sorts of good stuff. If you look at his final season at Princeton, 66 catches, 943 yards, and 7 touchdowns. First team All-American, first team All-Ivy. He led the Ivy League in receiving. Listen, the guy makes it happen. Very accomplished on and off of the football field. And really, again, as so many guys, I feel like this season, and maybe this is the case every year, Zach, but so many guys just really showing off at the combine this year. And it's really bringing eyes to who they were in their game. So let's talk some Iosivas. What you got?
yeah, so I'm going to level with you. Andrei Iosivas being successful at the NFL level would be amazing. It would be a great story. It would be like those few weeks of Linsanity in 2012 where the unheralded, undrafted Ivy Leaguer, takes the league by storm. Except I think it would be even more unlikely for Princeton's 6th all-time leading receiver to break out big. Iosivas plays mostly from the outside, but he has the versatility to take routes across coverage underneath zones, making plays over the middle as well. He uses his size pretty well. I think he can be a bully. Iosivas has very sure and strong hands. He wins at the catch point pretty well. He keeps the ball secured away from defenders. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. Those are all things that sound like they should play well at the next level and are playing well with at least the internet scouts right now.
Yeah, and giving Puka Nakua vibes in terms of leveraging him all over the field. Princeton would bring him in motion and flip it to him on a reverse. They'd give it to him on a jet sweep. They throw it to him on a screen. They throw it to him on a drag. Throw it to him deep. They got him involved all over the field, which was nice to see because I think one of his big positives, he was able to kind of flash solid hands in all different directions. So him being able to be used at all three levels and in all those unique ways, there wasn't really an area where you're like, he's not able to do this well. He's basically catching with his hands. I think sometimes he would let the ball in on his body, specifically on crossers. But it was good to be able to see the variability that he's leveraged in that. So that versatility, I think, is something that NFL teams will enjoy. Him being able to line up all over the formation, I think, is another thing that people will be excited about. But unfortunately, I feel like he's, as many others in this group, leaving us wanting more. Zach, let's talk through some of the things that we wish for with Iosivas.
Well, Iosivas wasn't even on radars until the Senior Bowl. And he showed out there, and he wasn't on sonar or even picked up by the Hubble telescope until he finished with the 5th highest athletic profile among receivers at the Combine. So that was his big kind of moment. On the field, though, against Ivy League competition, I expected him to stand out a little bit more. I wanted him to pop. So many times, Iosivas' functional speed in pads didn't show up the way it did out of those starting blocks at the Combine. And I think he was stiff out of his breaks, especially in mid-range routes, often allowing defenders to re-engage after the stem. Iosivas lacks true short area quickness too, at least to me, even though, I mean, you look at his Combine, you look at that 3-cone that was sub 7 seconds, and you're like, man, this guy gets in and out. He's a little stiff in and out of breaks. The short area quickness, especially when he was asked to change directions post catch, I think was lacking. And there were a lot fewer extra yards than is ideal. Like you're expecting him to tack on that yak, and a lot of times he got caught before he could get out of his own way after the catch. The red flags on Iosivas to me stand out like a string of forward-placed holes at Pebble Beach. Nearly all of the excitement surrounding him comes from controlled environments and small sample sizes. The film grinders answer to Ashton Dulin. That's what he feels like. You remember that a couple of years ago, and all of the metrics analysts were like, Ashton Dulin's going to be the guy, and you go and watch him, and you're like, I think this year the film jockeys, the guys who are Twitter scouting, the guys who have been to the Senior Bowl, the guys who watched and faithfully watched the Combine are getting really excited about Iosivas. And to me, man, just pivot to running backs at the point in your rookie drafts when Iosivas starts to seem appealing, because I just don't see much fantasy upside. And I hate getting to the end where you got players where it's hard to see it with, but I think that's the trap. And I think if you, as somebody listening to our show, if you can avoid that trap, you can avoid the dreaming, because so many people want to take an athletic profile like this and say, well, but what if he puts it together in the NFL? That doesn't happen very often. There is not much developmental about the NFL. They pay players to be who they are by and large. And so you've seen Iosivas be pretty good for an Ivy Leaguer, but not above and beyond. Even though he led the league in receiving, he didn't, lap the league in receiving. And so that's where I'm at with Andrei.
Yeah, and I think that you encompassed all of that incredibly well. The one thing that I'll add to that in terms of things that I would have wished for, and it's funny because there were some instances where he would work back to the quarterback, which is again something that you like to be able to see because you're not putting your quarterback in harm's way of turning the ball over when you do those kind of things. But his lack of play strength at 6'3", when we're looking at his ability to not be knocked off route, but then also just the little the nuance that he lacked in his routes was disappointing. And like you said, made some athletic plays, did some nice things. And also another thing that really bothered me in watching, for him to be 6'3" and not consistently high point the ball really bothers me because I think he has all the ability to actually go up and take the ball at its highest point, especially being the track athlete that he is. But for him to be able to consistently let the ball in on his body, you're just negating the advantage that you have. Iosivas, and I'm so glad that you brought up that point as well, Zach, regarding dreaming in those later rounds of drafts. He is, I feel like, the embodiment of the GIF "It's a trap" from Star Wars. Like, yeah, and it's not to say that he can't be good. Hey, Ashton Doolin's still bebopping around the league, right? He's still on a roster somewhere. But as far as our fantasy teams, not getting many starts. All right, 2 players down. Our last wide receiver on the evening. We're heading down to H-Town. What's good, H-Town? University of Houston. We're looking at one Nathaniel. Don't call me Nathaniel. Call me Tank Dell. 5'8", 165. So to Tank who and Tank where? What? 5th-year senior. He is someone who I feel like has been uber productive over these last couple of years. And that's what put him on the scene and put him on the map in that Houston offense that's going crazy with Clayton Tune at quarterback. Last year in 2021, his first team All-American Athletic Conference. He led the AAC in receiving, 90 catches, 1,329 yards, 12 touchdowns. 2022, anything I can do better. 109 yards, 109 catches, 1,398 yards, 17 touchdowns. I'm sorry. Excuse me? Baking soda? Baking powder? What'd he say? Again, first team All-American. First team All-AAC. He leads the nation in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. Tank makes it happen on the football field, Zach. That wide open offense in Houston is something to behold. Tank Dell has a lot of people excited. Are you one of those people?
So first, I had to dig into that nickname because you see a guy of that size nicknamed Tank, and you're like, "What is going on here?" The best story I could find, and the one I'm going to roll with, is when he was little, he had a huge dome. His head was real big, and his mom called him Tank because his head was so big. And so we're going to go with that one. But Tank Dell is small and well traveled. He began his collegiate career at Alabama A&M before a hip pointer derailed that season. Next, he transferred to Independence Community College in Kansas. You may have seen them on Last Chance U. Yep. And so shout out to Netflix for bringing them. But he was there just after that show. And then he ultimately landed in Houston. Fortunately for Dell, he can rent a car for the next leg of his journey because he'll turn 24 in October. And there aren't very many receivers in the 2023 class that have the in-route quickness of Tank Dell. He can separate against man coverage nearly any time he wants He doesn't always want to, and that is frustrating. But he sets up defenders and breaks off cuts very sharply at the stem of his routes. As if it isn't enough to have all the advantage of the quickness that Dell has, he also demonstrated an extensive knowledge of how to leverage that agility by planting hard, forcing a defender to cut and commit to a direction, and then he would cut back in the opposite direction. We talk about that a lot. It's a similar movement to a point guard setting up a crossover. So you get that little inside out dribble, you get the momentum of the defender trying to stop you from going one way, and then you attack the other direction, both laterally and vertically, and then the defender has to make up two directions. Dell does that really, really well. And he's also exceptional on the sidelines, often touching down with 2 feet inbounds. Again, even though only one is required in college. And a small player playing on the sideline, it's a little bit incongruous when you start watching, but man, he can play out there.
And I think, again, I don't want to throw out superlatives or have this be a case where this person is the best at this in the class. I just want to highlight, though, as we watch these players, he's one of my favorites to watch at the top of the route. When he's breaking off, or the nuance that he puts in terms of setting up defenders, as you highlighted, it's top notch. It's really good stuff. And his ability to really make cornerbacks, defenders uncomfortable with how hard he pushes upfield, because when he's coming off, and especially when we're looking at off coverage, everything looks like a go route for him, and he is able to just make people look really silly, whether it be a corner and a safety trying to double him up, or just the corner. But I really like what he's able to do in terms of destroying cushion, and obviously just being really crispy in his routes. I think that's some of my favorite in the class, excuse me, to watch. And when it comes to Tank Dell, he's not shying away from contact, and at 5'8", 165, it makes you a tad bit nervous, just because we're not sure what the longevity looks like when a guy is taking on that much contact and is that headstrong. But Zach, as we think through Tank Dell, 5'8", 165 is really hard to come back from. Small guy. Again, awesome athlete, weird route to his prominence, but he made it here. Let's talk through some of the drawbacks.
Yeah, with that size, Dell doesn't slot in very well within the traditional confines of the NFL wide receiver archetypes. I think his lack of elite size and speed makes it very difficult for Dell to win in straight lines, especially deep downfield. Against zone coverage, he has a habit of, and it's a bad habit, of throttling down his routes at the wrong time. So instead of getting into the lane between coverage, Dell stops before he's quite gotten there. And so that ends up costing him targets, and also cost his quarterback a few interceptions, because he knows that Dell is supposed to be there and be open, and he just hadn't quite gotten to where he needed to be yet. With the ball in his hands, Dell's agility seems to turn down a couple of notches from those really sharp cuts that he uses at the stem of his route. He's simply not quite as creative after the catch as you'd expect. Maybe the ball's a little heavy. He's carrying that extra weight. I don't know. But Tank Dell destroyed the one-on-one drills at the Senior Bowl. I don't know if you saw any of those. I tried to ignore them, but I got a few clips of Tank Dell just shaking people, and that stirred up quite a buzz. It propelled him into the consciousness of the Dynasty community. Unfortunately, all the quickness that he possesses is going to be really difficult to make up the chasm that he faces from his lack of size and again, lack of top end speed. If Dell does become a fantasy relevant receiver, it's truly going to be a road less traveled. The really cool thing, and this is a little bit of an aside, this is outside of my write-up, but you spoke about the 17 touchdowns. Inside the 20, he's got quick enough moves, especially if they're playing zone or if he's able to be leveraged from the slot where he doesn't have somebody getting hands on him. He's quick enough that he can separate in those short areas, whip routes, outs, hitches, those sort of things. And he can score touchdowns on those, which is kind of a rarity at the next level.
And that will be a question that I'm curious if either his draft capital will answer, or his hopefully early season introduction into the NFL consciousness. What or how are they going to leverage a guy who actually, for a spread offense, is well adept at running many routes, is able to win in many ways, but especially when those areas get tight, is the struggle going to be a case where there's not a window to find him, or he's not able to get the space that he needs? And I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. I'm hoping that he doesn't fall into the camp of the Iosivas and the Charlie Jones with the really late capital that would make reaching for him disappointing. But I have hope, because the things that he can do, he does them really well. And he's not just a gadget guy. He's someone who actually does really awesome things lined up straight up on the outside without bells and whistles or a ton of motion to try to free him up. So yeah, I'm intrigued. Well, color me intrigued. Next player on the list, we're actually going to transition now to running backs. And we're heading over to talk a little bit of Xazavian Valladay, the guy who takes up the mantle after Rachaad White makes it to the NFL. And again, Zach, I think for the majority of these guys, we're talking about the road less traveled. Xazavian spends 5 seasons, 5, count them, at Wyoming. You'd almost think that he played with Josh Allen for as long as he was there. But this past season, he actually finds stardom at Arizona State. He's second team all Pac-12. Obviously, he led the Pac-12 in rushing touchdowns because he scored 16 times, 215 carries, 1,192 yards, 16 scores. And thankfully, with this season, he also shows Zach Reed rule approved 37 catches for 298 yards, 2 scores. At his pro day, runs a 4.44. He's 5'11", 204 pounds. And again, he's 24 years old. And actually, here in the next couple of months, he's going to be turning 25 in July. Oh, Zach, I'll let you start where you will.
And I said this to you pre-show, but in my mind, all I can hear is X gonna give it to you blaring when I think about Xazavian Valladay. What? Unfortunately, this is a family program. I can't do that as an open, and I just don't have the energy to go an explicit rating on iTunes this week. I just don't have it in me. Valladay's path to the NFL is non-traditional. He played all those years at Wyoming. He did lead the backfield from his second year on until transferring to Arizona State last season. Valladay was an actual bell cow last year for the Sun Devils, carrying the ball 215 times, racked up almost 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 37 receptions. While posting those great numbers, Valladay does not have an elite trait to hang his profile on. He's an above-average pass catcher, but not an exceptional route runner. His initial vision is pretty pedestrian. He often runs into defenders or his own offensive linemen, but, and this is something that I have not seen from very many players, Valladay gains extra yardage with what I've deemed secondary vision, where he'll run to the intended hole, it's closed off, but he has the ability to keep working his way to find the next one and gain some yardage on plays that most other running backs would end up getting taken down or getting strafed out wide to the sideline and just be a nothing play. So he does have some interesting pieces to his game, even though none of it is what I would consider elite.
Jack of some trades, master of none. But I do like how you labeled that, because I was ready to come on and say, Zach, I don't know if we agree on the vision piece, but I do think that you categorize that really well, and I like that secondary vision. You gotta trademark that as soon as possible. Secondary vision, because I do think that when he's able to find whatever that little space is in that tertiary the tertiary point in the actual run, then I think that's when you see some of the best of his work. Is it always amazing, or is it always something that I feel like is as good as most in the class? Definitely not. But I do think that those pieces with that vision, and again, if he finds himself on an offense or on a roster, and he's at the back end, and he's one of those guys that by the time we get to like week 12, 13, he is getting carries or he's getting work because there's been just just a landslide of injuries ahead of him. I could see that. I could see it. Do I see him having sustained success for someone who might be going the later rounds or possibly even undrafted? Thinking about I can't even think of the player, his name from, he originally went to Colorado, undrafted to the Denver Broncos, hometown kid. I can't remember his name, but he was undrafted. People were excited about him. I don't think he'd have any sort of sustained success like that. But if he did bump his head on an opportunity, I could see it. I can squint, see it, maybe. Huh?
Yeah, and that's the whole reason why, and you'll hear us talk about this in the next couple of weeks leading up to the draft. Running backs in the later rounds, because you can squint and see a world where Xazavian Valladay gets some run for a couple of weeks. And if he does, that's worth that 4th round pick. That's worth that 5th round pick. That's worth a late 3rd, like whatever it is, because running back production, it's the elevator. It's the elevator. If guys in front of him got hurt and he gets carries, I think he's talented enough to do at least a little bit with it. In one-on-one situations,
Yes.
I think Valladay has difficulty escaping that initial defender. He's got, again, that lack of initial vision, but also a lack of agility. On top of Valladay struggles with that initial ability to identify open running lanes, he runs really upright. And I think that style causes him problems because he doesn't stay compact while he carries the ball. Valladay ends up giving up leverage at the end of runs and not being as powerful as you would expect him to be, and not even as powerful as some of his counterparts. Even when Valladay breaks off chunk runs, he never feels like he has a true top gear either. Like, you're always wanting him to break into that like downshift and go.
Yes.
And he just doesn't quite ever do it. In a class with as much top end talent and depth throughout, it feels like Xazavian Valladay is an afterthought. It's extremely unlikely to me that a situation presents itself that will allow Valladay enough volume to make an impact for fantasy. But like JMic said, you could see it on a week-to-week basis rather than a long-term basis. And that's kind of what you're shooting at in the later rounds.
And Zach, those are the times where you can maximize. And I don't want to get into our strategy talk, and I know we that's where we love the psychology behind what you do. But he's one of those guys. If he gets an opportunity, he's one player that I'm very happy with moving from quickly for future capital in drafts.
Xazavian Valladay starting 2 weeks. You pair him with a third, you get a second, you call it good.
There you go. Moving on from Mr. Valladay, we are sticking with, again, players who have spent quite a bit of time at the collegiate level. This time, we're talking a little bit of Camerun Peoples, aka Cam Peoples, straight out of App State. Now, Cam Peoples, 6'1", 217, fifth-year senior. Again, a player that's going to be 24 by the time that the season ends. He turns 24 in September. Cam had a really interesting route to prominence, or I guess this is what we're calling prominence. So, and in his time, his first season, again, 2018, he redshirts. 2019, he sees 3 carries, and then in 2020, boom, tough acting, 168 carries, 1,124 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Follows that up with, again, right around 166 carries, 926 yards, 14 touchdowns in 2021. 5 combined receptions over those 2 seasons. And in this final year, strangely, only 101 carries, 593 yards, 5 touchdowns. It kind of is the weird yodeling game from The Price is Right, where the yodeler gets to the top of the hill and it just kind of falls off a cliff, unfortunately, because you bid too much. Cam Peoples, big fella, definitely one of the larger backs that we've seen in the class. What do you have on Cam?
You better put some respect on Nate Noel's name. He's the guy who came in and took those carries. But the Appalachian Trail runs over 2,190 miles from Georgia's Springer Mountain all the way to Mount Katahdin in Maine's Baxter State Park, right in my backyard. It can take 7 months to complete, and only a quarter of all hikers who attempt to take on the trail reach its final peak. The trail meanders within 17 miles of Boone, North Carolina, home of Appalachian State and NFL hopeful Cam Peoples. Peoples is at his best when he's running in traffic between the tackles, which sounds really weird, but he is very good at it. Even when it looks like all hope is lost, Peoples has the ability to make jump cuts to extricate himself from trouble. At 6'2", 220 pounds, his agility really sneaks up on you. But Peoples' penchant for breaking arm tackles in traffic should come as no surprise. People will also tack on a few extra yards or gain those tough yards in short yardage situations by getting low and driving with his legs, and he's big enough to move a pile.
Listen, you watch enough film on him, and you can count the number of people who are probably incredibly sore the next day. I remember those days myself. And when you had that guy who was really putting and pounding on you at the running back position, and you were waking up the next day after trying to hit him, you felt it. And I'm confident watching Cam Peoples play. A whole lot of people were waking up the next day like, oh, why did I choose this game? There are guys consistently just looking like mincemeat after they try to hit him, and his run strength is, I think, one of the things that I really like the most about him. Because if you're going to have a role and you're not going to be catching the ball or adding that value, then at least be a destroyer of worlds and make those actual rushing attempts matter. And I think that he did that on a consistent basis. I also like his ability, like you said, Zach, just in terms of that lateral quickness. He's able to be quick enough with his feet to be able to, I won't say make the most, but he's able to get a little bit more than you'd think someone of his size may be able to do in this situation. Cam Peoples, here again, second to last player on the day. Zach, let's talk through some of his weaknesses that we're just not on board with.
Yeah, sadly, it seems to be the new rite of passage for running backs to tear an ACL. And Camerun Peoples joined the fraternity as a sophomore in 2019. He rebounded the following year, rushing for 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. And although Peoples returned healthy, he still struggled with pace. He runs like a Power Wheels Jeep. You're either moving full stop going forward or you're stopped. There are no gears in between. And speed is actually a problem for Peoples when he tries to get outside of the tackles, and also when he appears to be poised to break longer runs, he just doesn't quite have enough to escape pursuing defenders. Uh, so many times you saw him get caught by a foot and taken down. And Peoples is yet another zero in the receiving game. He notched just 11 catches over his career as a Mountaineer. With his injury history, his lack of speed, the absence of pass catching, and the fact that he lost significant touches and eventually his starting job to Nate Noel, it's very difficult to buy in on Cam Peoples. He's got the size and the strength, but I don't think those traits often translate specifically to fantasy points.
Yeah, little Wally Pipp situation. He gets hurt, misses a few games, and just like that, it was never the same. So, Cam Peoples, I won't call him an intriguing prospect. I will say that I just did enjoy him just obliterating people. That was fun to watch. I did enjoy that piece of it. Last name on the evening, we've taken our talents now to Alabama, Birmingham to talk some DeWayne McBride. We've got another Debo. I feel like every year we've got somebody with the nickname Debo year in and year out. McBride, 5'10", 209 pounds. And hey, we're back to the players who are at least somewhat normally college age. He's 21. He'll be 22 in July. In his 3 seasons at UAB, this final season was really the highlight of all highlights for him. 233 carries, over 1,700 yards rushing, 19 touchdowns, coming off of 12 touchdowns the season before. Once again, unfortunately, a 0 in the pass game with only 5 receptions in the last 2 seasons. He did make second team All-American honors. He was the Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year, first team All Conference USA. Hey, people are pretty excited about DeWayne McBride and his prospects at the next level, even without the actual Zach Reed rule approval. But we want to hear from the actual Zach Reed, not just the rules. What do you have on McBride?
Some of the world's greatest works of art are incomplete. Venus de Milo stands in the Louvre, her arms conspicuously missing. The Sphinx stands guard in Giza, its noseless face gazing eastward over the Nile. DeWayne McBride's rookie profile, with that gaping hole where the pass catching evaluation should be. McBride is a tremendous runner between the tackles. He adeptly picks the path of least resistance. He gets up to speed very quickly. I think he hits the hole with good burst, but McBride also has enough power to completely overwhelm a defender one-on-one if he has to. He does a fantastic job of getting 2 hands on the ball when contact is imminent, and that's one of those things that you don't always see, but it's a nice little feather in his cap that he is conscious of taking care of the ball. And I also think in goal line and short yardage situations, McBride gets very low and leverages that strength that he's got in his lower body to gain those tough yards inside. McBride is constantly pushing downhill on his carries. He's pressing that advantage that he's got as a north-south runner.
One of my favorite things from this entire time of watching film this particular cycle is him between the tackles.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it, between his ability to find space, between the fact that I feel like definitely in this group, but even in many of the groups that we've talked through before, his creativity as a runner, his ability to understand, I think, and operate well within his skill set. You don't see him out there trying to do a whole bunch of other things that I feel like he's not able to actually do. And his contact balance is probably his calling card in this group, or not just in this group, but him, period. His ability to be able to absorb contact and not be bowled over. I really, really liked watching DeWayne McBride. Strange, no catching. And so you wonder, Can that be something that limits his ceiling, Zach? Is there anything else in this game that you feel like brings it down a little bit?
I mean, obviously, the critique of McBride has to begin with his lack of pass catching. Bluntly, it would be a tough decision for a quarterback whether to risk throwing to McBride or simply dumping the ball off to Venus DeMilo with her no arms. It's not just this one facet of the game that McBride struggles with. However, when he gets into traffic, McBride shortens up his stride, bringing his feet in too close together. And I think sometimes he sacrifices that balance and elusiveness with those choppy steps. It actually got better the further on in his career you watched, which is part of the reason why I like to start early and watch to see if they can make adjustments and clean up some of the issues. And McBride did that for his part. He also is not particularly effective getting to the outside. He's really prone to being strung out along the line of scrimmage all the way to the sideline, but he knows it, and he tries not to let that happen. He tries to get upfield. Any player being talked about in the third round of rookie drafts is going to be imperfect. The problem that DeWayne McBride highlights is that not every flaw is created equally. As good a runner as he is, the overall fantasy ceiling is capped by that missing out on easy points in the passing game. While I think McBride's rushing ability is artwork, like I really think he is a very good runner, he's going to need some extreme volume to be valuable. The ideal situation for DeWayne McBride is last year in Detroit.
There you go. I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Yes.
like that's what he needs. He needs to be Jamal Williams because he can do that. He can be fantastic in that role. There just aren't that many instances where that role exists.
And it's so funny because Jamal Williams, and this flies in the face of everything that you tend to talk about, Zach. But in those times in Green Bay, Jamal Williams is able to show, hey, I've got pretty decent hands. Like, yes, throw me the rock. And he gets to Detroit, and they're like, nah, we just prefer to use you as the battering ram here. And this is where he finds the majority of his fantasy success, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
And I think McBride could do well to be able to find himself in a role just like you said. And that was 100% going to be my question. The only other piece I think that makes me nervous about McBride, on top of the things that you've talked through, is the fact that he fumbled 9 times. 9 fumbles is a lot of fumbles. And yes, he carried the ball a lot, so he had a ton of opportunity, but 9 fumbles, it's putting the ball on the ground. And if you're not offering pass game utility and you come in and put the ball on the ground, it could be a case where we never see you again. You could get that Jonas Gray treatment.
I was going to say the answer is not to be drafted by the Patriots because that's a real good way to end up in Siberia.
I mean, just sadness. My man's on a milk carton. Where are you, McBride? All right, Zach. 6 players down, catching these hands, and for a couple of these guys, hands Venus DeMilo.
I would say I think we caught the hands in this group. It was a little bit of a struggle sometimes, but we got DeWayne McBride, we got Tank Dell. There's a few bright spots in here.
Yeah, I think that feels good, and I think that DeWayne McBride's one of those guys that could be really interesting when you're looking into the later parts of your draft, 3rd, 4th round. Again, he finds himself on an offense that's really, really good. You could see him just plugging into a role that could be fantasy viable very early on. So let's talk with the wide receivers first, because that's where we started, Zach. Any notable places where they were ranked when it comes to your film grades, or is it a case where, hey, we're at the back end now and they're not grading out terribly high?
Well, I mean, Tank Dell comes in the highest out of the 3, and I think that's pretty obvious. If you have watched any of these players, if you've watched Tank Dell at all, even if you've seen one clip on Twitter from the Senior Bowl, Tank Dell is the top of this group. I've got him in kind of this weird tier of like Puka and Jaden Reed. He's at the bottom of it, but Puka and Jaden Reed and Rakim Jarrett, who they're all pretty decent. They have some pieces that we like, and the same with Dell. I think Jones comes next, and then Iosivas pulls up the rear. But I still struggle seeing too much fantasy impact from either of them.
Yes, and yes. I have Tank Dell, highest among the three. Tank, he also graded very similarly to Rakim Jarrett, Jonathan Mingo in that area for me.
Yep.
I have those guys there. Iosivas and Jones. While I like Jones, again, his hands a lot and what I hope he could be, he graded higher than I thought that he would. So I had him graded actually above Bryce Ford Wheaton, above Jaden Reed, because I do think that some of the pieces that are reliable for him, again, he fills a nice role for a team. And the Andrei Iosivas, I'm not there in terms of his film. So we'll leave that there. Let's transition over to the running backs, Zach. Any highlights here? Are we leaving Cam Peoples? Are we leaving Xazavian in the dust? What are we doing here with the running backs?
Yeah, again, it's DeWayne McBride with the potential upside of getting carries and getting high leverage carries potentially because he's such a good runner inside, is such a good short yardage runner that you're hoping he gets either the B side of a committee or the goal line work, and he can do either one of those, I think. And so he's the highest grade I've got in here, but you know me, it's not that high because there's no pass catching, and I'm gonna knock you for that. It's a brand at this point. And then I got Xazavian Valladay and Camerun Peoples pulling up the rear, and they are both way down at the bottom of the list.
For like the beginning of a Wire episode, way down in the hole. So let me ask you this: DeWayne McBride or Lou Nichols?
I think I've got Lou Nichols, but it is closest. McBride's a better runner, I think, but I've got Nichols graded out higher.
Okay. Chase Brown or DeWayne McBride?
That's real close, but it's Chase Brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking
Yeah.
there. All right.
Yeah.
I'm in a similar space because I have, and again, I had that weird place where Evan Hull, Deuce Vaughn, and Mo Ibrahim all had similar film grades or the same exact film grade, even though they all get there in very different ways. I had our dearest DeWayne McBride settled directly behind those guys, slightly ahead of Chase Brown, and I maintain I am. Listen, we talked about dreaming earlier. Chase Brown is one that, again, the flashes that he showed, I really want good things for him. I really do, because I think that those were really nice things that he flashed. Anywho, enough of that. Catch these hands. The hands have been caught. Hands have been handled appropriately. Zach, we've made it through another Hootenanny. Any grand takeaways? How are you feeling at this point? Let the people know as we close down the shop. Where do you stand now?
I'm going to go ice up, man. This was rough, but the 2023 class, and we've been through 60 players at this point. The 2023 class is what we thought it was. It is. It's got a really nice top end. You've got Bijan Robinson, the elite tier running back. I've seen people go so far as to say they have him as a higher level prospect than Saquon Barkley. So that's the level of player we're talking about. He's slightly below Barkley for me, but he's fantastic. He is an elite running back at the next level. You've got the quarterback tier that is really nice. You've got at least 3. You may end up with Will Levis getting draft capital, and he's not a bad quarterback. We've had this conversation. I know you're a Levis believer. I won't go so far as to call you a homer, but you're a believer, and I think that he gets a lot more flack than he should. I think he's a much better quarterback, a much more accurate quarterback, especially short. Like, he can game manage more than he's given credit for. So again, there's a quarterback tier. You've got some decent top end wide receivers. I'll put Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jordan Addison up against almost anybody in almost any class. Like, they are very high level players, very skilled players. They're not what the NFL necessarily deems as a wide receiver one. But as our friend Peter Howard is wont to say, the NFL likes the smell of their own farts. And so they continue to beat their head against being wrong sometimes, even when the right answer is sitting there looking them right in the face, out touching Olave and Wilson in the only season that he played with them. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, fantastic. Like, great pass catcher, good enough runner to be able to give you a little extra. I still think we're going to be a little bit Swiftian, maybe just a little bit disappointed that he's not that uber elite back, but he's real good. And he's going to put up, in the running back one range, I think, seasons. It's a good class. You've got a lot of depth. You've got a lot of depth at running back. I mean, how many times did we talk about over the course of the 3 running back weeks how difficult it was to separate these players? It's not because they're bad. It's difficult to separate because there is a lot of talent in this class. The 2023 class is what we thought they were. And people are being disappointed by it right now. Now is the time to go get picks right now. In a Superflex, those top 7, top 8 picks are fantastic. And you're going to be able to get some of those picks at a deal right now because everybody has been talking down this class. And so that's kind of where I would leave you, is there is still some value to be mined because these picks were so expensive. The acquisition cost was so high for such a long time that people are being disappointed and bailing right now. And it won't be that way, I don't believe, in 3 weeks after we've had the draft, because now it'll be new again. It'll be fresh again. People will be talking about how Jackson Smith and Jigbo went 14 to the Patriots and how he's going to be amazing. I'm dreaming now, I hope. But it really is a time where you can mine some value with this class because it's a good class. And even the late first, second round, you're going to be able to get some running backs. You're going to be able to get some tight ends that I think will end up returning some value, especially with what you have to put up to acquire them. Don't get caught up in the dreaming. Don't get caught up in trying to make these players something they're not. But do evaluate what these players are and go get the ones who are really talented, because there are a lot of them in this class.
Well said. And this is the year, Zach, where I think your process to be able to buy on credit, if you will, with these picks, if you have an abundance of second and third rounders this year, you're likely leaving with players that you like or that have found themselves to be very talented prospects. It's going to be such a fun adventure navigating these second rounds, because again, we know that the Capitol is going to say one thing, but just the players themselves, the run of guys who are actually intriguing, just yes,
yeah,
this is the one.
You're going to be sitting in the mid-second, and there are going to be 3 tight ends who are fantastic. There's going to be Abanaconda. There's going to be Tank Bigsby. There's going to be Evan Hall. There's going to be Zach Evans. There's going to be Eric Gray. There's going to be Kendre Miller. There's going to be Sean Tucker. Like, we could just keep going. Like, all of this, Tyjae Spears, like, it's all going to be there. And that is the measure to me of a good class. I want to be able to identify the top tier. Man, we can do that in this class.
For sure.
And then I want to have depth pieces that I can add for cheap that are going to produce fantasy points going forward. I think we've got that too. Man, it's a fun class.
Man, I'm excited to be able to get into it. The draft is ever so close, only a couple weeks away, actually a little over 2 weeks. Shout out and a huge thank you to our boy Matt Foreman.
Yes.
On Twitter at Fat Mormon, off on vacation this week, put in a ton of work with us to be able to watch these players, give his insight, and it's always a treat to be able to pod with him and to be able to hear his thoughts and how he's able to bring that to us and bring so much value to what we do. Foreman, you are loved. You are appreciated. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your time. It is always great to be able to chop it up with you, brother. And I hope that you are enjoying this vacation incredibly well. And especially all the work that he's also doing over there with the folks at the FF Dynasty. It's a ton of work that he's been putting in over this season. It feels like it's a lot of overdrive here in the offseason for him, but he's been faithful in this process. So thank you, Foreman. We appreciate you, man. I'm excited. I'm excited, Zach. I'm excited to see where we continue to roll through when it comes to what regularly scheduled program may look like going forward, or whatever else we have planned for draft season. But hey, drafts are here. Hopefully the hay's in the barn with preparation and you're ready to be able to take advantage. Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you to each and every single one of you. Again, you could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend time with us, and we're grateful for it. Old and young, if you've been here for a while, or if you're new to the program and you picked us up because you saw Zach on the grind, or somebody told you to come check us out, whatever it is, thank you. Thank you. Cannot say it enough. You are appreciated. Thank you. Truly. Zach, it's all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for dancing with us. The Hootenanny is a labor of love, but it's also so much fun for us, and it's so much fun to get that interaction with the community. I just was on with, and so were you, JMic, I know, but just we're on with Casey Kasem, the Get Real podcast, where she kind of goes in depth around with people in the community and how you got there. And I said, she asked me how I got in the industry. And I said, I don't consider myself in the industry. I am industry adjacent, but I am community centric. And the Dynasty Dummies have an absolutely fantastic community. I can't tell you the number of DMs and things that I get asking questions, talking about the Hootenanny, the compliments. Like, we appreciate that. The constructive criticism, appreciate that even more. But thank you for rolling with us. Thank you for being here. We will be back at you again next week. It'll be a different show. It'll be, we don't know yet, but it'll be something, and it'll be fun. And hopefully we're going to hit you with the Dynasty Dummies Day 2 draft show. We try to do that on the second night of the draft, because everybody likes the glitz and the glamour and the glory of day one. The real meat happens on day 2 for Dynasty. And so that's where we'll be. We appreciate you listening to this show. JMic's at JMic Check. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thanks for listening. Peace. Da-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na.